Right. Thanks, Chris. I just caught the back end of your session. Some great conversations there. Now, I'm just waiting for the rest of my team to join in. I'm not seeing them at the moment. Welcome, Mr. Lim Kok Tai, who's the CEO of Singapore Food Agency, Vandana Dal from the Accelerator Grow in Singapore, and Barbara Gopillon, who is the global head Dole Ventures in Singapore. So our conversation over the next 45 minutes is about global food tech hubs and talking about the Singapore experience. Now, everybody here today, is obviously excited about Earth Day. We've been celebrating it in one way or another for the last 51 years. It's sort of surprising when I was thinking how long it has been going on for. And I think we've all enjoyed it in different ways. And certainly this year, I think, yet again, it's challenging us in many different ways. And those of you who have just come in for this session would realize that there's been, I think it's up to 5 sessions before us already, and there's another 15 or more as we work our way around the world. So we've just moved from Japan now into neighboring Singapore. But obviously a key part of anything to do with Earth Day and climate change is, of course, how are we dealing with food? And so that's why we believe what we're talking about this afternoon, of how we're developing food tech and agri-food tech hubs, how that we can do things better, produce more with less, produce different kinds of food, and at the same time make sure that we're hitting the right notes on nutrition, affordability, and at the same time providing people with what they need while also respecting the planet. So we're going to have a multivariate conversation, but I'm going to ask each of my panelists about their views on Earth Day and why it's important. But before I'll do that, I'm going to just introduce everybody a little bit more. So Kok Tai is the Chief Executive Officer of the Singapore Food Agency, and he took on that role back in April of 2019. It was a new statutory board created under the Ministry of Environment, Water and Resources, and it's all about overseeing food safety and food security. So Kok Tai and his agency really is the organization at the moment with all things food. It is a new agency. It was preceded by the AVA, which Kok Tai was also the CEO of since October of 2017. And the whole point of creating a new agency was to create one agency that handled all food matters in Singapore. Then Barbara, who actually I've luckily worked with previously when she was with Unilever. She set up Unilever Foundry here in Asia and helmed that for 5 years prior to moving to Dole last year. And Vandana, again, I've had the privilege to work with at Grow. She has a background both in finance as a banker for many years and is a qualified CPA. So interestingly, each of the people today, myself included, we all come from quite varied backgrounds, but we are passionate about all things agri and all things food and how we can make a difference. So with that introduction, if I could, Kok Tai, go to you first and ask you, why is Earth Day important to you, to your organization?
Hey, thanks, Adam. When you actually pointed out that the Earth Day has 51 years of history, that's very long. If you count backward, it actually started in the 1970s. Yeah, and I think over the years, it has made many great strides and progressed quite a lot. I think Earth Day is very significant because when we think about it, we don't think about today, we think about the future. we think about future generations, our children, our grandchildren, and their children, their grandchildren. Yeah, but what that then means is we have to make important decisions today, not just for ourselves, but bearing in mind how they will impact these future generations, and how we leave behind something that's sustainable, that they will have and continue to live with it. Yeah. Thank you. Over back to you, Adam. Yeah.
Okay. Barbara, what does Earth Day mean to you?
Hi, Adam. Thank you for having me here. I'm super happy to be with you on that panel. I think, celebrating Earth Day serves as a conscious reminder how fragile is our planet and how it is important to protect it. I'm not only talking from my own point of view, but from my organization point of view as well. I mean, like you said, it's been 50 years since inceptions. Means we had 50 times the occasion to celebrate Earth. Now, if you look at the progress we have made, I think the road is still very, very long. So for me, Earth Day is also an opportunity to rally more people to climate change, fighting climate change. It's an opportunity to, pinpoint a day where we can raise awareness, educate our kids and the younger generation on the importance to fight climate change. So fighting climate change should not be only one day. It's of course every day, but I think today is the opportunity to get more people on board and more people aware of the importance of that mission.
No, and I think that's right. It's every day, but it's great that we have such a global initiative like Earth Day, and also this marathon that the Future Food Institute is organizing with the FAO to bring so many different organizations and individuals together around the world to get thoughts. And as you can see, it's all being recorded so people will have access to this and get the messages across. Vandana, for you, Earth Day, what resonates?
We have only one Earth, and it's such a pity that we only celebrate it one day in the year. But I think it's, for me personally, it's the decisions that we make every day, from choosing whether it's public transport that we take, or becoming vegan, or, sustainable clothes that we shop for, or sustainable companies that we invest in. I think it's the decision that we make every single day that is, more important than just a day's celebration. But for me and for my organization, I think today is a reminder that we just need to continue doing this every single day of the year.
Yeah, and I think that's very much the case. And certainly for me, I can't say I've celebrated the 51 of them, but I've been around for them all. And I suppose that's interesting in itself. It's really, for me personally, my sustainability journey most probably started 15 or so years ago when I saw An Inconvenient Truth, the movie. And that actually sort of resonated with me in a very big way. And I then started to get involved in that. And so it's become quite a sort of a personal mission. And again, the company that I co-founded, Padang, we're passionate about food and agri, and essentially, what can we do? How can we make an impact as we strike out to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals over the next 10 years or by 2030? And for me, what's really interesting, and it brings it to bear here, is that when you look at the 17 climate, the SDGs, if you look at food and we focus on food and agri, we really will go a very long way of achieving every one of the 17, because food touches them all when you think about it in so many different ways, from the obvious of alleviating hunger, through to gender diversity, through to sustainable consumption. It really is the one that, for me, is very front and center. And also, what I like about this day is it is trying to drive action. I think that's what we all want. We want to see action. And so let's get into it, because there has been a lot of action in Singapore over recent years. And I'm sure many of the viewers today would be aware that Singapore is not a big country, whether in landmass or population. Yet it's been making quite a few headlines in recent times. And this comes from a whole lot of factors. But I'd like to now sort of kick off and ask Kok Tai to give us a sense of, what has Singapore been doing? How has SFA and your other ministry colleagues and the government and general sort of policy and support, what have you been doing that sort of driven Singapore to such prominence in becoming an emerging global agri-food hub? And then we'll move on and talk about some of the other aspects with the corporates and acceleration activities. So, sir, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Yeah, you're right. We are thinking about the food. So let me first give some context about Singapore. And thanks, Adam, for the introduction. We actually a very small country. We don't have a lot of land. In fact, we are also, and we also don't have a lot of energy as well as water. So if you look at Singapore, we import almost 90% of our food. When my former agency, the AVA, prior to the formation of SFA, look at the food security issues, and we look at the 90% import, we started to think about, what are the potential issues we may face. That prompted us back then to start looking at what are potential technologies that could solve the food security or food supply situation for a city-state like Singapore without a lot of land, limited water and energy. So when we start to look at that, when we start to analyze this, we look at international reports, it became apparent that the demand for food globally is growing because, the population itself is growing, but the other factor is countries are becoming more affluent. The things they eat are also changing. So that's going to put pressure on the food production. On the other hand, food production, the way it is being done today, is facing certain risks and constraints because of extreme weather conditions, because of climate challenges. So back then, we started to look at some solutions, and we found something quite interesting. The technology in the space for growing food was evolving very fast. We started to see vertical indoor farms using LED lightings, using technology. And many of the companies that we saw back then were not just experimenting, but moving towards scale production. Even in aquaculture, we also see some closed containment solutions. So back then, AVA actually start to look for some sort of productivity fund and grant to help such companies to see where that technology can go with. And through that, we see very promising companies after the investment in the technology and the growth and the productivity yield. We found that through R&D, it is possible to actually grow food even in a country like Singapore. So with the formation of the SFA, as we look at the situation, food security, we thought that it is important for a country like us to think about how to find the food solution for Singapore, and the way to do it for us is through science and tech, through R&D, through working with the industry, getting them to look at new technology to do it. And in that process, we put together with NRF and the other A-Star, Singapore Food Story R&D grant. It comprises about 144 million, and we launched the grant sometime in 2019. And we have received many interesting and exciting proposals. We are at the final stage of evaluating them, and we should be able to identify which are the very promising one that they can get a grant called. So that 144 million for the R&D grant is actually something. If I share more about the R&D grant, the Singapore Food Story R&D grant actually comprises 3 themes. The first theme covers very much the food growing technology. How do you grow food? Not the open space type, but more for a city-state with limited land, with water, and how to do it in a sustainable manner. So that's one part, one theme to it. The second theme covers a very interesting area. It's called novel food. Things like plant-based protein, things like cell-grown meat. So that one is actually something that we work with A-Star to launch it. That is something very exciting because it's very new. And of course, there's a third theme. What is food without safety? And from a SFA point of view, we also put in this theme, this one call to look at how else we can look in terms of food safety, how to raise the level of that. So that 144 million, we launched one call. We are going through a proposal. They should be coming back with some grant. So if you look at Singapore, right, we are interested in growing food locally, finding actually the solution to a city-state like Singapore. And so through the R&D, we are doing it. In fact, we set a goal or an aspiration for ourselves, 30 by 30, which is to produce 30% of our nutritional need by 2030. And as I mentioned earlier, for the solutions we are looking for the sustainable one. We are looking at those that are very efficient in the energy use, in the water use, and high yield in the limited land that we have. Yeah, so that's the journey that we are going, and we are not, like I said, the solution we look for are really those that are suited for urban situation.
Yeah, and I think it's certainly shown the importance of leadership in setting kind of moonshot goals, 30 by 30. Let's face it, when we're looking at 10% today to go to 30% by 2030, that's a hefty goal. And that's something that motivates people and gets people excited and interested. And certainly the funding that you're offering. Now, 144 million is a lot of money, but in the scheme of things, and when we're looking at what we're trying to do, it's not huge amounts of money, but it attracts interest both locally and also as people should know that Singapore is incredibly welcoming to overseas technology, and to, 7,000 companies have headquarters, in Singapore. And so it's a combination of the MNCs that are here and the vital and sort of dynamic startup ecosystem as well. So to that point, over to you, Barbara. Given that the government has taken such a great leadership role and putting things out there, where do you see the role of corporate collaboration? I mean, you've done a lot of that work both at Unilever days and now heading up Dole Ventures. The role of corporate collaboration in achieving these kinds of goals.
Yeah, I think corporates are extremely important, but as important as all the other players of the ecosystem. When you have the ambition to create a hub or a central place to deliver value to the community, I mean, you need to think in terms of ecosystem and how you can create a better connectivity between all the different players to ensure that you deliver value. People will come into your hub or will come into your ecosystem if they can find what they need to grow, whether they are an entrepreneur, whether they are a researcher, or whether they are a corporate. So I'm a strong believer of open collaboration between corporates, entrepreneurs, community builders, and I think it's crucial for Singapore to keep developing and opening the hub to corporates like us if we want innovation, flowing into our veins here in Singapore, despite of the small size. And I think the size doesn't matter. We can have a great place here to innovate and find entrepreneurs and new IPs and technology that will help us to solve our challenge. And we have to remember that corporates bring more than just a brief or a problem to solve. It's also, we are bringing expertise, we are bringing access to markets, we are bringing other partners. And I think it's really important for all the other corporates to know and recognize that they have an opportunity and a responsibility to be and to play a role in that hub.
Yeah, and Just next Monday, actually, a very interesting corporate to corporate collaboration is opening up. Beulah and Givaudan
Yes.
are launching their plant-based protein site, which is fantastic. Seeing two such large corporations coming together in Singapore to create such opportunities, both for one another and also for the ecosystem, whether they be startups, SMEs, or scale-ups. And I think, again, I mean, people have been coming to Singapore for so long because it's an attractive place to do business. It's a great place to do business. There's a great deal of certainty. But perhaps, and we do focus a lot on startups, but we also know that startups aren't the solution to everything. We do need the MNCs who have the scale, but the excitement that startups bring, and I think we do talk about it. So, Vandana, sort of going to you, how do you see the role of, both accelerators and the startup ecosystem, and how is that contributing to the Singapore food story?
I think the credit goes to the Singapore government for having the foresight to create an ecosystem. And what makes it vibrant then is, the collective play with, the SFA, the ESG, corporate partners like Dole, and then having put in place accelerator program like GROW. We have a couple of other, food and ag specific accelerator programs. The idea being to, quickly bring in new and novel technology that could have an immediate impact in Singapore's food security story. But then Singapore also serves as a launching pad, right? So the ASEAN market is a huge opportunity. So startups find that landing in Singapore and launching into the region is an extremely, lucrative proposition now. The 30 by 30 grant supports a lot of those initiatives. We have very strong IP rights, which startups are looking for, a highly skilled talent pool as well. You mentioned the Givaudan Buller, setup. There's also the A-Star and Temasek Food Tech Innovation Center that's coming up. So all of this that kind of, accelerates the commercialization of promising food technology is all already established and available in Singapore. And as an accelerator, I think it makes our job very easy then to kind of, be a part of an ecosystem which has all its, sharps and pickles already together. I think being in Singapore has a whole lot of benefits in terms of the location of Singapore, but it's just that all of these pieces that are vital to an ecosystem have been perfectly placed in Singapore.
Yeah.
So we are seeing a lot of innovation coming out of Singapore, and it's really exciting to be, in the middle and the thick of all of that.
And maybe just a general question to whoever might like to comment. What else do we perhaps need to drive a successful hub? Are there other factors that we need?
Adam, Oktay, maybe I'll chip in on this one. I think, besides the R&D, the aspiration, Barbara talks about companies, then Vandana talks about the different pieces, the IPs and all that. One of my colleagues actually reminded me that it is also very important to have clear regulations, rules that people can look at, in particular on food safety. Actually, it is with that in mind that SFA, after we were formed, or in fact before we were formed, we were looking at the alternative protein space, whether it's the plant-based protein or the cell-grown culture meat protein. And we started to look at that and start thinking about how we can go about regulating the food safety in this space, because it is really new. And we took a look at the world. Different countries were thinking about it, but we don't see any model coming up. So we thought that as part of ecosystem development, it is important for us to take a shot at how to create such a regulatory framework. And you may look at Singapore as something that we approved the cell culture meat sometime late last year, but to be honest, it's a long journey. We don't do it overnight. We actually started about 2 to 3 years back when we start thinking about this. we work with different agencies, especially the health-related one, to identify experts who can come in to advise us. And we sort of form a panel of such experts to help with us. So you all already heard about the Eat Just, which got their approval for the self-cultured chicken meat in Singapore. We don't do it alone. We actually work with Eat Just. They send us, the dossier. We work with them on some of the different areas, and actually Eat Just responsibly actually ran and do those studies, and show us the data. And together with the expert panel, we evaluated those data. It is only on those basis that we were confident that it is possible that we are able to sort of approve the safety of the Eat Just self-cultured meat. And we are not just staying here, because with that experience, we actually crafted a novel food safety framework, and we put it on our website, and we actually welcome companies that are interested to operate in this novel food space to approach us and engage us early to talk about how we can go about concurrently work on the food safety aspect, even as these companies develop the production, the methodology, how to scale the production. It is also very important in our view that they also look at the food safety part, in which case our framework provides a guide about how they can go about doing it, and we are actually very happy to work with them so that they can get involved and work with us, not just for their innovation side, but actually at the food safety side, concurrently doing this, so that when they are ready to launch the product, they would also have the necessary data for us to evaluate their food safety.
Yeah, and I think that is a wonderful example of the collaboration between corporates and government and agencies in Singapore to have that early discussion, which in many other locales, you don't have that opportunity. You have to make the submission perhaps, whereas here it's very much sort of a kind of co-creation and getting direct feedback of what needs to be changed, and turning food safety and regulations into a competitive advantage for Singapore. A lot of companies are now being attracted to Singapore. Let's face it, it was headline news early December last year, a world first. And there's a lot of background interest, obviously, on cultivated meat and plant-based protein. And so I think this has set Singapore up really well. I'm kind of wondering what might be next. That's trying to think what you might be thinking of in different regulations, but I guess we might have to ask that another day. Perhaps looking to the future. Vandana, you just closed or just launched your latest cohort of the Accelerator. I know it was very successful, a lot of applications, and it's a great way. You get a terrific lens on how people are thinking. I was wondering if you could share with us some of the interesting tech that you saw coming through the Accelerator, and perhaps is it giving you some idea of the future?
Okay, sure. So it's been an intense couple of weeks for us. So we received over 250 applications from almost about 60 countries. And we had the tough task of narrowing it down to, 10 that finally made it to the cohort. Some very interesting trends, and maybe I can speak about two of them here. And if I was to, use SDGs to provide a simple categorization, we are seeing increasing consumer-focused technologies. So there is a large percentage of applications that are positioned to address the SDG 12, which is the responsible consumption and production of food. And whether that is through development of novel foods and ingredients, or improving supply chain inefficiencies to reduce food waste and loss. And the second one that we've noticed is also an increased focus on water and ocean-related technologies. Now that's water purification and irrigation systems, or ocean-related solutions in alternate seafood and seaweed, which is based on the carbon capture systems. So some very interesting tech coming out of it. You'll be soon hearing about the ones that have made it to our cohort. It's been diverse both in terms of technology and geography, but if I were to pick an underlying trend, everyone seems to be focusing on sustainable solutions now.
And did that seem quite different to previous cohorts?
I think both in terms of the number of applications that came in, yes.
Oh, someone's got a dog in the background.
Me, sorry about that. And also diversity in geography. So this particular cohort, we've got startups all the way from Canada to the UK and even from Nigeria. So it's going to be very exciting to see, how Singapore is positioned to bring all of them in and then to help them scale their businesses.
Well, as you said before, I mean, it is this combination of being in an attractive environment with the regulations, a great place to land, and then, as I'm sort of fond of talking about, is sort of scaling up not only in Singapore, but across the region because we're so well located here. Sort of, again, switching back a little bit around corporates, Barbara, I mean, you work with a lot of large corporates, have represented. And we've discussed sometimes, is the innovation always going to be coming from the startups, or are we seeing more coming from the large companies? Because let's face it, the large companies have got the scale to make an impact and really get it out there, whereas we've got the small startups that are kind of the attackers at the edges of some of the big FMCG brands. I just wonder where you think that might be going. And also we're seeing even some of the big tech giants, the sort of Microsofts and the Googles of the world, starting to take a much more active interest in all things food and, to Vandana's point, sustainability in general. So where are the big companies playing in all of this and driving food innovation, do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I think it's a great question. And my first answer is like innovation is going to come from everywhere. Yeah. It's not going to be either or, the big corporates or the small startups. Different skill set, different IPs, different objectives. What is important is to really understand that nor the startup or the big corporate should be working alone. And what you're going to see is more and more collaboration. When you look at the big guys, everyone has his own accelerator, incubator, I mean, whatever the name we're using today, there is more and more collaboration between corporates and startups. So I think that's, for me, an important thing to note. We at Dole, and as I'm heading Dole Venture, I'm really looking at it from a partnership point of view. We are looking at developing more and more strategic partnerships and investment with startups around areas like access to food and waste around the world. We have recently launched our Sunshine for All fund, where we're committing to spend $2 million in the first year to collaborate and develop pilots with startups. But that doesn't mean that this money cannot also be spent with great projects with other corporates. So there is room for innovation for all the players in the ecosystem. And also innovation is going to be heavily pushed by consumers. They are asking for healthier products, greener products. So, depending on what you're trying to tackling, sometimes the corporate is going to be more equipped to respond to their answers, while in other areas, its startup was going to be more agile to develop a new DTC solution to give access to food. So, yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a mix. Certainly, we are going to see a lot of innovation from both sides of the coin.
And one of the things we've seen perhaps over the last 12 months is the inability to travel. And so I know it's some people and some startups here in Singapore that were wanting to get out of Singapore because there were certain facilities, equipment that they needed that wasn't available. And what was interesting about that was that, well, I have to get the job done. And so in the classic sort of innovation way, or necessity, the mother of innovation, people started to develop workarounds, find different partnerships that they perhaps didn't realize were here. And I was just sort of intrigued just to hear from perhaps you and Vandana about, I mean, Vandana, normally you'd be bringing cohorts in and working with the startups. So in your accelerator, that wasn't possible. And, you know, Barbara, likewise, the crossover of people moving around. I'd be interested to know how that impacted you and what perhaps that says about the future. But maybe Vandana first. Oops, I think you've muted the dog.
Sorry. Okay, I'm back. So I think it did get us to take a step back and sort of, rethink how we were going to continue supporting startups, despite the fact that we couldn't have them travel to Singapore, be, participating in an in-person program. So we also were innovative in our thinking. And what we did deliver then was a completely virtual program, which was the Singapore Food Bowl. And
Which
that it was, extremely appreciative of the partnership that we had with Dole in delivering that program. So the idea was to kind of continue being able to support the startups. So whether it was in providing them, access to investors or, connections with corporates or, getting them to speak with mentors, all that was possible. And we ran a completely virtual program. So although there was no travel, we did have to kind of tweak certain delivery, aspects. The startups that had probably requirements to be on farm had to be, channeled towards a different focus for the time till they can actually start, traveling. So it didn't stop us. But I think what we were able to then deliver is a program that was more focused on Singapore's, food security. We did get a lot of interest from the region. And so this year, despite the fact that the travel ban continues, we're going to go ahead with, an ASEAN food bowl as well. And Barbara, looking at you for your continued support in that.
Yeah, and what I wanted to say is, I mean, from my point of view, the situation, and I'm not saying it was pleasant or it is pleasant, but I did meet a lot more people and a lot more startups. Yeah. And the last experience we had with a food bowl was, it was bam, bam, bam. I mean, there is no way you can overrun and it did bring some efficiencies, but also some people who usually would not participate to events because they are too far, they are in the US, etc., were actually made themselves available online. So I think it kind of shift a little bit the networks and really allow us to engage with people in a different way. And when it comes to pilots at Dole, I don't know how we managed to do that, but we are working with a company based in Singapore, ActiveO, and it's a system that delivers clean waters and also save water when we are cleaning our fruits. And we needed a pilot to happen in the Philippines. It's a massive machine, like it's a machinery and the whole thing. We managed to send it to the Philippines, but the setup was a little bit of a nightmare, but we did through Zoom calls, guidance, okay, red button here, blue line here, etc. We managed to get the machine up and running with the founder here in Singapore and our team in the Philippines really following instructions step by step, like an IKEA box almost. So I mean, it's possible. It takes more time. We have to be organized, of course, but I don't think it has stopped anyone.
Yeah, Koktay, you were about to say?
If you don't mind, I just chip in. I mean, hearing Barbara and Vandana, I think is telling us that constraint is just something that drive innovations. With the restrictions, we will find ways. And it's the people's thinking, the way they imagine their ingenuity, they will overcome those constraints. So if you look at Singapore, yes, small country, limited resources, even labor is also limited, but those constraints drive innovation. And that's where, when we look at the 30 by 30 goal, that's where, when we look at the Singapore Food Story, the R&D grant, that's where we come in and say that, actually, despite the constraints, we want to work with companies. We want to work with different peoples around the world to find the solution, the food solution for Singapore. And we want to do it in a very sustainable way. Obviously, we are not looking at going for self-sufficiency, because we know that will not be done. That's not actually not doable, and we will still want to work with the world for the remaining 70% of our needs. Yeah. Back to you, Adam.
Okay. Well, I mean, we're sort of nearing the end of our time, but I guess if we next actually go to Turkey, where coincidentally I did the climate core training with Al Gore many years ago, so that sort of connects to this in a nice way. And that actually was during some protests at Texan Square, which I ended up being tear gassed 3 times in 2 days. So that is my memory of climate core training. On a focus, are there what do we think is next in terms of the big new opportunities? Just anyone who'd like to, where we see some of the formats might be different. We were talking about driven by consumers, it's sustainability. What are some of the other new things that we might be seeing over the next couple of years in food innovation that might be launching here in Singapore?
Well, maybe I can just mention that as we have launched our Dole Promise, we have made the commitment to bring more nutritious food to 1 billion people. That means that we will be looking at novel foods, novel formats, new ingredients, less sugar, less fossil fuel-based plastic. So it's really a matter of understanding what problem we're trying to solve first, where are the priorities, because in any case, I'm sure we will find those solutions and we will have access to that. So just a little shout out to any person who is looking at it. Just log in on sunshineforall.com to apply if you have any great technology that you want to share with Dole.
Okay, well, Cocteau, if anyone was asking you for advice, other cities around the world, what would be the key piece of advice if they're wanting to develop a agri-food tech hub?
I think we're always happy to share, but throughout this conversation, we talk about the companies, we talk about the ecosystem, the startups, the accelerators, and the regulatory framework. We need them to be there. And as you hear from Barbara, the innovation, a lot of it are coming from corporates, coming from the startups. We do need to want to look at that space. The novel food is a very interesting and exciting area. And even as we look at that, I think it's also very important to think about the safety, the food safety aspect of this novel food. And like I said earlier, I welcome companies. If you have such an idea, work with us to talk about the food safety aspects and look at our novel food framework. We'll be happy to work with you.
Well, as we move on very shortly, there's the invitation from the CEO of the Singapore Food Agency. So please come, contact us, happy to share. And we all know that it is actually not about one food tech hub, it's about how we are all connected across the globe. And I think that's what we're seeing through the pandemic. If we couldn't see one another, we still could connect. So different hubs around the world will be specialists in different areas, and all sort of focusing on the ultimate aim of feeding the planet with affordable and nutritious food in a sustainable way. So thank you, Cocteau. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Vandana. And now I think I am handing over to Istanbul, or certainly to Turkey. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Adam.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Launch next, yes. Launch next destination, Turkey.